The dream wasn't grand. It wasn't about wealth or a big house. It was a simple, beautiful dream, whispered into the quiet of the night for 9 long months. It was the dream of a family, a home filled with laughter, and a husband who would look at our children with the same awe that I felt. I had carried that dream just as carefully as I had carried my 10 daughters. And my husband, Leo, shattered it all in less than 10 seconds. NWE were standing in the nursery. It was the only room in our small house that felt complete, a sanctuary of hope I had poured my heart into. 10 tiny cribs, assembled by my own hands, lined the walls. I had painted a mural of a sprawling oak tree, its branches reaching across the ceiling, with 10 little birds nestled among its leaves. My daughters were still in the hospital, growing stronger in the NICU, but we had come home to prepare for their arrival. And I was showing Leo the mobile I had just finished, a delicate creation of felt stars and a smiling moon. I thought it would be the first thing they see when they wake up, I said, my voice soft with emotion. NHE didn't look at the mobile. He looked at me, his face a cold, hard mask I didn't recognize. "They're not coming here, Clara," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any feeling. It was the voice of a stranger delivering a verdict. And I laughed, a small, nervous sound. "Don't be silly, Leo. They'll be home in a few weeks. Dr. Evans said they're doing wonderfully." "No," he said, his voice firming into something sharp and cruel. "You might be coming home. They are not." NTHE felt moon slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. The air left my lungs. What are you talking about?" NHE finally looked around the room, but not with love. He looked at it with contempt, as if it were a scene of a crime. "This," he said, gesturing to the cribs, the mural, the tiny folded clothes. "This was your fantasy. My reality is 10 daughters I never asked for and a mountain of debt I can't pay. This is not a blessing, Clara. It's a financial death sentence." NHE walked over to the wall, to the beautiful oak tree I had spent weeks painting. He picked up a stray hammer left over from assembling the cribs, and before I could even scream, he swung it. The hammer hit the wall with a sickening crunch, shattering the plaster, right through the heart of my painted tree. My heart broke before their eyes had even opened. NHE didn't stop. He swung again and again, his movements jerky and violent. He wasn't just breaking a wall. He was methodically destroying my dream, piece by piece. The birds, the branches, the leaves, all obliterated in a cloud of white dust. Each blow was a physical impact on my soul. "I've already spoken to the adoption agency," he said between ragged breaths, his face slick with sweat. "They have families lined up. Wealthy families who can afford this burden. It's the only way. We can start over, try again, for a boy. Just one." And I stared at him, at the man I loved, the man who had held my hand and promised me forever, and I saw a monster. He wasn't just shattering a wall, he was shattering me. He was trying to erase our daughters from existence because they were inconvenient. He saw them not as our children, but as a financial liability. NHE finally dropped the hammer, its clang echoing in the ruined room. He looked at me, expecting me to understand, to agree, but the woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't possibly comprehend. In the dust and destruction of my beautiful nursery, a mother's rage was born. He thought he was shattering my dreams, but he had just handed me a reason to build a new one from the rubble, a future without him in it. Hello, my friends watching. Your support gives me the courage to share this. If my story touches you, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel. It makes a world of difference. Let's go back to how this nightmare began, and a dream built on humble ground. Leo and I weren't a fairy tale. We were a real-life love story, built on shared dreams and humble ground. We met in community college, both of us working 2 jobs to pay our way through. He was studying to be a mechanic, his hands always smudged with grease, but his smile always bright. I was studying early childhood education, my heart set on being a kindergarten teacher. We fell in love over cheap coffee and late-night study sessions. Our dream was simple: a small house, a steady job, and a family to fill the rooms with love. We saved every penny. We bought a tiny fixer-upper house in a quiet neighborhood. We spent our weekends painting walls, laying floors, and planting a small garden in the backyard. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. It was a home built not with money, but with our own 2 hands and a whole lot of love. Leo was my rock. He was a good, simple man. Or so I thought. He was proud of his work, proud of our home. When he talked about having kids, his eyes would light up. A little boy to teach how to fix cars, he'd say, grinning. A little grease monkey, just like his old man. I'd laugh and tell him I wanted a daughter to read stories to. We never imagined we'd get more than we bargained for. When I found out I was pregnant, we were ecstatic. We cried and held each other in our tiny, half-finished kitchen. The first ultrasound was a shock. The doctor's eyes went wide. "Well," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "you two don't do anything by halves, do you?" I'm counting 10. NTHE news hit us like a tidal wave. 10 babies. We were terrified, overwhelmed, but also filled with a sense of wonder. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly we were the small town couple with the big family on the way. People were kind. Our neighbors threw us a small party. The church started a donation jar, and BUTI started to see a change in Leo. The initial wonder in his eyes was slowly replaced by a shadow of anxiety. He started working longer hours, picking up extra shifts. He became quiet, withdrawn. When I tried to talk to him, he'd brush it off. "Just tired," he'd say. "A lot on my mind." NHE stopped talking about our babies and started referring to them as the situation. The financial reality was sinking in, and it was drowning him. I tried to be optimistic. "We'll manage, Leo," I'd say. "We have love. We have community. We'll find a way." NHE would just shake his head, a dark, frustrated look on his face. "You don't get it, Clara. Love doesn't pay the bills. 10 kids. It's not a family. It's a circus." People are looking at us like we're a freak show. And I was so focused on the miracle of the 10 lives growing inside me that I missed the signs. I missed how his anxiety was curdling into resentment. I thought his fear was about money. I didn't realize it was about something deeper, something uglier. He wasn't just afraid of being poor. He was afraid of being seen as a failure, the man who couldn't provide, the man with 10 daughters and not a single son to carry on his name, a name that meant everything to his traditional working-class pride. The humble ground our dream was built on had started to feel like quicksand to him, and he was looking for a way to escape. The cracks in the Walgen MY pregnancy was a town-wide event. I had to stop working early on, confined to bed rest at home. The community rallied around us in a way that brought tears to my eyes. Women from my church formed a group, Clara's Angels, who brought me meals, helped clean the house, and sat with me when I was lonely. The local hardware store donated supplies for the nursery. My kindergarten students sent me drawings of 10 little babies. I was surrounded by a cocoon of love and support. Leo, however, seemed to resent it. He saw their kindness, not as a gift, but as charity, a public acknowledgement of his inability to provide. He would come home from work, see one of the church ladies leaving a casserole on the porch, and his jaw would tighten. "I don't need their pity," he'd mutter, storming into the house. NHE became obsessed with the nursery. It was the one thing he could control. He spent every spare moment in there, assembling cribs, sanding floors, his work frantic and almost angry. I thought he was nesting, preparing for our children. I didn't realize he was building a cage for his own resentment. NTHE cracks in our marriage began to show, small fissures that I tried to patch over with optimism and love. He stopped touching me, stopped talking about the future. Our conversations became purely functional, about bills and groceries. The easy laughter that had been the foundation of our relationship disappeared, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. One evening, I tried to reach him. I took his hand and placed it on my belly, where a flurry of kicks was happening. "Feel that, Leo?" I whispered. "They're saying hello to their daddy." NHE pulled his hand away as if he'd been burned. "I need to work on the car," he said, and left the room. The rejection was so sharp, so sudden, it was like a slap. My heart ached, not for me, but for my unborn daughters who were already being pushed away by their own father. NTHE financial strain was immense, and it was his only topic of conversation. He would sit at the kitchen table for hours, surrounded by bills, his face grim. "Do you know how much 10 sets of braces cost, Clara? 10 college funds? 10 weddings?" he'd ask, his voice laced with a bitterness that was becoming his new normal. "We'll cross those bridges when we come to them," I'd say, trying to soothe him. "No," he'd snap. "The bridge is collapsing right now, and you're just standing there smiling." And I felt like I was living with a stranger. The warm, loving man I had married was being eroded by a tide of fear and resentment. He saw our children not as a blessing, but as the cause of all his problems. The dream we had shared was becoming my dream alone. He was no longer my partner in it. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of our life, and the walls of our small house felt like they were closing in on me. I told myself it was just the stress, that once the babies were here, he would see their faces and his heart would melt. I clung to that hope like a life raft, not realizing it was already sinking. Nay, promised broken NTHE birth of my daughters was a medical feat, a whirlwind of coordinated activity that left me exhausted but euphoric. 10 girls, all healthy, all breathing. They were small, but they were fighters. As they were whisked away to the NICU, I felt a love so powerful it was a physical force, a shield that I thought could protect them from anything. Leo was there, but he was a phantom. He stood in the corner of the delivery room, his face pale and unreadable. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't speak. When the nurses congratulated him, he just gave a tight, grim nod. My heart ached for him, for us. I told myself he was just in shock. I made excuses for him, even then. NTHE first few days were a blur of recovery and short, precious visits to the NICU. I would sit for hours, looking at my 10 miracles, whispering their names, telling them how much their daddy and I loved them. I was lying, of course, but I was trying to make it true, trying to will his love into existence. Leo visited the hospital only once after the birth. He stood in the doorway of my room, refusing to come further. "How are you?" he asked, his voice formal, distant. "I'm tired, but I'm so happy," I said, my own voice trembling with emotion. "Have you seen them, Leo? They're so beautiful." "They look like you." "I saw them through the glass," he said flatly. "They're small." NTHAT was all he said. He didn't ask their names. He didn't ask how they were doing. He stayed for 5 minutes, his hands shoved in his pockets, and then he left, saying he had to get back to work. NTHE, day we came home from the hospital, me, not the babies, was the day the world ended. The house was clean, thanks to my angels, but it was silent and empty. It didn't feel like a home we were preparing for our children. It felt like a house in mourning. That's when I led him to the nursery. I was so proud of it, so desperate to share something with him, to reconnect with the man I had married. I showed him the mural, the cribs, the mobile. I was trying to show him our dream, made real, and that's when he broke his promise. The promise of love, of family, of forever. With a few cold, calculated sentences, he told me he was giving our children away. He called them a burden. He called them a financial death sentence. NTHE violence that followed was the most shocking thing I had ever witnessed. It wasn't directed at me, not physically. It was directed at the room, at everything that represented my love for our daughters. The hammer blows on the wall were blows against my heart. He was not just destroying a room, he was trying to destroy the very idea of our family, the very fact of their existence. When he dropped the hammer and stood there, breathing heavily in the dust-filled room, I saw him clearly for the first time. The fear had consumed him. The resentment had twisted him into something ugly and unrecognizable. He truly believed that erasing our daughters was the only solution, a practical, logical step to fix a problem. NHE didn't understand that he hadn't presented a solution. He had made a declaration of war. He had shattered my dreams, yes, but he had failed to see that from those broken pieces, a mother's righteous fury could build a fortress. And from within that fortress, I would fight him for the lives of my children with my last breath, and the first stone of a new foundation. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, icy calm settled over me. I looked at the ruined wall, the dust settling on the tiny cribs, and then I looked at Leo. He was waiting for my reaction, tears, hysterics, pleading. He was not prepared for the woman who looked back at him. "Get out," I said. My voice was quiet, but it held a core of steel he had never heard before. He blinked, confused. "Clara, be reasonable. This is the only way," I said. "Get out," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Get out of my house. Get out of my daughter's house. You are not welcome here." "Our house," he corrected, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "My name is on the deed, too. You can't just kick me out." "Watch me," I said. I walked past him, out of the ruined nursery, and picked up the phone. I didn't call the police. I called the first person I could think of, the leader of Clara's Angels, a formidable, no-nonsense woman named Martha, who had 5 grown sons and the unwavering conviction of a true matriarch. And I explained the situation in short, clipped sentences. "Leo wants to give the babies up for adoption. He just destroyed the nursery. He's refusing to leave." There was a moment of silence on the line, and then Martha's voice, low and dangerous. "I'm on my way. Lock yourself in a room." "Don't talk to him." And I did as she said. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I could hear Leo pacing in the hallway, muttering about how I was being irrational, hysterical. He still didn't get it. He still thought he could manage me. Martha arrived in less than 10 minutes, and she didn't come alone. She brought her 5 sons, all of them large, silent men who worked in construction. They filled the doorway of our small house, their presence a silent, immovable wall. Martha walked in, her eyes scanning the scene, the destroyed nursery, Leo's furious face, the locked bathroom door. She looked at Leo, her expression one of profound disappointment. "Leo Hayes," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of the entire community. "I have known you since you were a boy. Your father would be ashamed of you." NTHAT one sentence seemed to wound him more than any threat. He paled, his bravado crumbling, and, "You're going to pack a bag," Martha continued, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And then you are going to leave. You will not come back here until you are invited. Am I clear?" Leo looked at Martha, then at the wall of her sons, and he knew he had lost. He was a man who understood power dynamics, and the power in that house had shifted irrevocably. He packed a bag in silence and left, not even looking at the bathroom door as he walked out. When Martha knocked and told me he was gone, I finally unlocked the door. I didn't collapse into her arms. I stood tall. "Thank you," I said. "This is just the first step, child," she said, her voice softening. "He will fight you. You need a lawyer." NSHE was right. This was just the beginning. But as I stood in my ruined nursery, surrounded by the women who had become my family, I laid the first stone of a new foundation. It wasn't built on the humble ground of a shared dream with a man I no longer knew. It was built on the bedrock of a community's love and a mother's unwavering resolve. And an army of angels NTHE days that followed were a blur of strategy and support. Martha and my angels descended upon the house, not just as friends, but as a well-organized army. They cleaned the nursery, patched the wall, and one of them, a talented artist, offered to repaint the mural, making the oak tree even bigger and more beautiful than before. Their message was clear: what one man had destroyed, a community of women could rebuild, stronger and better. Martha connected me with a local lawyer, a young woman named Emily, who had recently moved back to town to start her own practice. She worked pro bono, fueled by a fierce sense of justice and outrage at my story. Emily was sharp and strategic, She immediately filed for an emergency custody order and a restraining order, using the destruction of the nursery as proof of Leo's unstable and coercive behavior. Leo, as expected, fought back. He hired a lawyer from the city, a slick man who immediately tried to frame the narrative. They claimed Leo was a concerned father, overwhelmed by the financial reality, and that his actions, while regrettable, were born of a desperate desire to provide a better life for his children than he could offer. They painted me as an emotional, unrealistic mother, incapable of grasping the practical challenges ahead. What they didn't count on was the power of our community. When the court date was set, Emily didn't just prepare a legal argument. She prepared a testament to our town's support. She subpoenaed the owner of the hardware store who had donated the nursery supplies. She got a statement from the head of the church about the community fund that had been established. She had affidavits from every single one of Clara's angels, each one detailing Leo's increasing withdrawal and my unwavering commitment to my children. NTHE's story became a local legend, a testament to the town's character. The local paper wrote a feature story, not just about the decuplet mom, but about the community that had wrapped its arms around her. The narrative Leo's lawyer was trying to sell, that of a lone, hysterical woman, was being drowned out by a chorus of voices that said, "She is not alone." NMY daughters, meanwhile, were thriving in the NICU. I spent every day with them, my heart healing a little more with each visit. I would tell them about our army of angels, about the new mural, about the home that was waiting for them. I was their only link to the world, and I made sure the world they heard about was one of love, strength, and community. Leo's attempts to contact me were funneled through his lawyer. He offered a settlement. He would sign away his parental rights to 5 of the girls if I would let him have custody of the other 5 to place for adoption. He was trying to bargain for my children as if they were assets in a business deal. The offer was so monstrous, so devoid of humanity, that it only strengthened my resolve. "Tell Mr. Hayes," I instructed Emily, my voice cold as ice, "that my daughters are not for sale. Not one of them. Not ever." NTHE battle lines were drawn. He had his money and his city lawyer. I had my truth and an army of angels. And I was ready for war. The weight of a hammer NTHE courtroom was small and packed. On one side was Leo, looking uncomfortable in a suit that didn't fit right, and his slick, confident lawyer. On the other side was me, Emily, and Martha, who sat right behind me, a silent, formidable presence. Leo's lawyer presented his case first. He was smooth and persuasive. He spoke of Leo's working-class background, his pride, his terror at the prospect of failing his family financially. He presented pay stubs and bank statements, painting a grim picture of our financial reality. He even had a, quote, parenting expert testify that raising 10 children in our circumstances would be detrimental to their well-being. He was trying to make Leo's monstrous suggestion seem like a rational, if painful, choice. He framed the destruction of the nursery as a, quote, moment of emotional crisis, a cry for help from a desperate man. Then it was Emily's turn. She didn't call an expert. She called our neighbors. She called the kindergarten principal I used to work for. She called Martha. One by one, they painted a picture of a loving, capable, and determined mother, and a community ready and willing to support her. NTHE final piece of her case was me. When I took the stand, Emily asked me only a few simple questions. She had me describe the nursery, the mural, the mobile I had made. Then she asked me to describe what happened on the day Leo came home. And I told the truth, my voice quiet but steady. I described the look on his face, the coldness in his voice, the hammer blows. Non-cross-examination, Leo's lawyer tried to rattle me. "Mrs. Hayes, you're an emotional woman, aren't you? Wouldn't you agree that your husband's financial concerns were valid?" "I agree that his concerns were valid," I said, looking directly at the judge. What was not valid was his solution. He didn't see 10 daughters. He saw 10 expenses. He didn't see a family. He saw a burden. A father doesn't try to eliminate his children because they are expensive. He was trying to protect you all from a life of poverty, the lawyer insisted. He was trying to protect himself from a life of responsibility. I countered. Then Emily did something brilliant. For her final piece of evidence, she submitted a single photograph. It was a picture of the nursery wall, taken the day after the incident. It showed the gaping, ugly hole from the hammer, right in the middle of the beautifully painted oak tree. "Your Honor," Emily said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "Mr. Hayes's lawyer calls the destruction of this nursery a cry for help. We call it what it is, a threat. It was a violent act designed to intimidate and coerce a vulnerable, postpartum mother into giving up her children. That is not the act of a desperate father. It is the act of a bully and a coward." The judge, a woman who had raised 4 children on her own, stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she looked at Leo, her eyes filled with a cold fury. The weight of that hammer, it turned out, was heavier than all of Leo's financial arguments combined. It was the weight of his character, and the judge had found it wanting. NTHE ruling was swift and decisive. I was granted sole legal and physical custody. Leo was ordered to pay child support, his wages to be garnished directly. He was granted supervised visitation only, contingent on completing an anger management course and a parenting class. He had lost. He had tried to shatter my world, but he had only succeeded in shattering his own. In a house full of dreams, life after the court case was not easy, but it was beautiful. Leo, humiliated and defeated, rarely showed up for his supervised visits. The man who was terrified of the financial burden of 10 children was even more terrified of the emotional responsibility. He eventually faded from our lives altogether, moving to another state, a ghost from a past we had survived. Our small house, once a place of broken dreams, became a house full of new ones. It was loud, chaotic, and filled to the brim with love. My army of angels never left my side. They helped me navigate the challenges of raising 10 girls, offering everything from babysitting to homework help. We became a new kind of family, one forged not by blood, but by choice and unwavering support. And I went back to school online and got my degree, eventually opening a small, in-home daycare so I could be with my own children while helping to support us. It was a humble life, but it was rich in everything that mattered. NMY daughters grew up knowing they were wanted, loved, and fought for. They knew their story, and it made them strong, compassionate, and fiercely protective of one another. They were 10 unique, brilliant souls. One became a teacher, like her mom. Another became a mechanic, her hands always smudged with grease, and she would laugh and say she got that from her father, the only good thing he ever gave her. They became nurses, artists, scientists, and small business owners. They were good people. They were happy. And on their 18th birthday, we threw a huge party in our backyard. The whole town was there. The oak tree mural in their old nursery had long been painted over, but a real sprawling oak tree, planted the year they were born, now shaded our entire yard. NTHAT evening, my daughter, who had become a writer, stood up to give a speech. She looked at me, her eyes full of love. "There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi," she said. "It's the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The philosophy is that the object is more beautiful for having been broken. Our family was broken once. A man with a hammer tried to shatter our mother's dream. But a community of women, an army of angels, put the pieces back together. And they didn't use gold, they used love. And they made our family, our lives, more beautiful than the original dream ever was." And I looked at my 10 incredible daughters, my legacy of love, and I knew she was right. Leo had shattered my dream in seconds, the simple dream of a husband and a family. But he had inadvertently given me something so much greater. He had given me a reason to fight, a community to lean on, and a house filled not with one broken dream, but with 10 new, beautiful, and unbreakable ones. And that was a life more wonderful than I could have ever imagined.